Good morning. Can I call everyone to attention, please? Yeah, let's get started. Hello, friends and family. And Siva's, both the immediate family and the nuclear. Let me thank you all profusely for being here today. It's not easy on a Sunday morning to get up here so early. Some of us have traveled from quite far. Now, let me start by thanking the family for being so cooperative and helpful to get this thing off the ground. And giving us all these beautiful pictures, and that's from Maho, where Siva first worked, that's Maho, where the staff gave him a send-off when he came to Jaffna. I still can't believe with all this that Siva is not with us. I just can't comprehend that. He's here. You know, I can still picture him with that broad smile and the bushy eyebrows going up. That's something that we always remember, and it's not a picture that I can take off my mind. Worse still, none of us were really able to give him a farewell, to bid goodbye to him because of the current pandemic situation. That hurts us so much, and that unfulfilled feeling seems to remain, and that is probably why we can't imagine that he's not here with us. And knowing Siva, he was such a rationalist and an agnostic, and knowing that, he would probably say that, look, this is my end, and what's there for you all to say anything about it? You know, that's the kind of rationalist he is. Now, without enlarging any further, let me start asking our speakers to come forward and celebrate his life. But before that, let me just read out a few house rules. The hall is meant for 100 people. This is under the COVID regulations. I think we are just about right. And therefore, let's remember that and try and keep a social distance as much as we can. There is an open ground. Later on, we can go out and spread ourselves as well. And the other thing that I want to mention, Siva's friends, that all of us, we want something created in his memory that will be long-lasting. And the suggestion had been that if you can organize an award from his high school in his name, which will go to one of the best students who come up every year. And that seems to have caught the imagination of a lot of people. And Dr. Nirminathan is working on that. And hopefully we will get enough contributions towards that. And I have already spoken to Yogesh, who is very happy with that. And I suppose that too is a good omen. Now, having said all that, let me first call upon Adan, his eldest grandson, to come over and describe his grandfather to us.
They can see the video, but not the audio.
Hi. I've known Tata, or I should say Tata's known me for my entire life, basically. He was there when I was born. I would see him regularly year round. and we would phone call if I couldn't. He and Amama took me and my family on countless holidays, and if there were any events we were both invited to, we shared a car every time. So from that, I think we can all deduce that I spent a hell of a long time with him. I've learned a lot from him. He taught me the value of humility. In fact, he did it very well. See, I actually didn't know how much he did for his family, friends, and his patients until quite recently. While some might say he worked himself into an early grave, I would say he worked many people out of their early graves. He also had a burning passion for innovation. He would always tell me about the newest botanical discoveries and was very passionate about his culture, as he would often explain how we are older than Sanskrit and basically superior to any other culture, especially Sinhalese. I remember once I was at him at Amama's place playing FIFA, and he came in and said, "Oh, are you watching the football?" And I just turned around and raised my eyebrow. I was just like, "No, it's a game." And then his jaw just dropped, and he was just amazed at how real it looked, even though it was like FIFA 15. And he just still couldn't believe it. And I overheard him talking to Amama about it, like no one had ever seen it before. And I don't know, that story just made me really appreciate how proud he was of me. Not me playing FIFA, but he would often tell his friends and family about any of the accomplishments me or my sister had made. With such great pride, it almost felt like he was being sarcastic, but he wasn't, and it would make me feel amazing, and make anyone else he talked about feel amazing. But what I really miss about Tata is the little things. Knocking on Amma and Tata's door to find Amma having to walk up 3 flights of stairs yelling as usual before opening it, and then see Tata emerge from his man cave of a home office about half a minute later, even though it's right next to the front door. Or if I stayed at his and Amma's, I'd wake up every morning to see him panting on the cross trainer, which was right next to my bed. And I mean, apart from that, I think personally Tata's loss was the biggest loss I've experienced in my life. And I'm not very good with emotions, if you know me, especially within my family. But I think I sort of had that in common with Tata. While he was incredible at bringing the best out of people and is praised for his ability to crumble our family arguments, I noticed, especially near the end of his life, he didn't want to disturb the peace in the family, even when we were all wary of his impending death. He was so selfless that on the last day that his wife, children and grandchildren got to be with him, he was struggling to walk 5 meters using a walker to get from his armchair to his bed. And yet he managed to treat the day like any other, which in hindsight I think was to save our feelings more than his. He has had a great impact on all of our lives. I know that I will miss him and continue to miss him, as he was just that special to me, as I know he was to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Arden. I thought Sri wanted to say a few words.
I'll say it at the end.
Okay, then let's bat on and let me call Ayangaran, who is Siva's youngest brother's elder son, a senior scientist, and he is speaking on Siva's love for music and culture. May I call upon Ayangaran? Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Mayur, and thanks everyone. Periyappa loves Tamil.
Yeah.
You might have heard. If language is the roadmap of a culture, then Periyappa was one of Tamil's leading compasses. Language is, of course, a fluid concept, ever flowing and changing to keep up with modern advances, while reminding us all of our past. On this roadmap are familiar hotspots,
of foods, fine arts, architecture, and spirituality that with great effort and diligent direction can withstand the erosions of time. Born into a literary musical culture in Sri Lanka that both thrived and struggled during his lifetime, authentic adherence to Eelam Tamil culture's core identifiers and values was understandably of the utmost importance to Periyappa. Authenticity that brought the words of literary giants Avvayar, Ila de Pudan Devanar, and Thiruvalluvar to his young ears and ensured that they were passed down. Authenticity that kept the Carnatic currents of Subbalakshmi, Jayashri, Sudha, and Samya flowing in his home. Authenticity that ensured the latest Nadahan dramas were beamed to his living room. Why? Because culture provides historical pride that in turn nurtures self-esteem. Periyappa loved Carnatic music. His long support of cultural events at the Nayanadi Manivarkale Welfare Association, the Madras Music Season in Chennai, as well as his own organisations, MIOT, and on GTV, was rooted in this generational effort to memorialise culture. His 3 daughters carried this torch on through their study of the arts, which has in turn been passed down to their children. Periyappa loved food. Porichamin, Pusanikai curry, idiyappam and sodi, mutton rolls, vada, you name it, he loved it. Much to the appreciation of Periyamma when a great Jaffna dish was served, or to her mighty displeasure when his garden vegetable patches became a massive eyesore. To him, they were a way the garden served a higher purpose. He did, however, feed far more than he ate, through the many acts of altruism, as we've all heard, but mainly through force-feeding his kids when they kept resisting a meal. Mahal saapade, mahal saapade. In his later years, his cultural interests expanded. His grandchild's recent choir performance at the Vatican was a particularly proud moment for him. His palate grew to savour other cuisines just as lovingly as his native one. Perhaps the esteem from successfully promoting Tamil culture in his orbit gave him the confidence to try different things, new things, to find out what higher purpose that too could serve. It appears now more than ever that adaptation is key to successfully preserving connectivity within and between growing communities still trying to find themselves in changing times and places. Periyappa too began to realise this with the loss of fluency in the Tamil language he witnessed with the diaspora's younger generation, with the all too familiar resistance to memorising ancient Kurals and other hymns. But sometimes he too liked to be reminded that part of the thrill and success in discovering, learning, preserving and growing a cultural identity can be by going in mapless. Following Periyappa's example, we all have a lot to live up to. However, our paths need not be the exact same. A symphony need not have every instrument play the same note for a piece to be in perfect harmony. And so, as a young Shakespeare reminds us all, if music be the food of love, then just play on. Rest easy, Periyappa, and thank you all.
Aidan, thank you very much for that lovely synopsis of his love for culture and language. Thank you. Now let me call upon Aruran, who is one of Siva's nephews. He's going to enlighten us with Siva's love of garden and nature. Let me call upon Aruran.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here today. For me, Periyappa embodied many of the best ideals of humankind. There was Periyappa the family man, devoted husband of over 40 years, father to 3 spirited daughters, grandfather to 4. The uncle who was there by my side with my aunts and my cousins when I made my first trips abroad to the US and France at the tender ages of 5 and 6. There was Periapa, the political activist and commentator, who would sit on his chair in his downstairs family room of his home and talk for hours to anyone who would listen about Sri Lankan politics, the Modi government, and any other political issue of the day. There was Periapa, the doctor and mentor, the doctor who devoted his life to public service and helping people get better. The man whose service to the medical profession transcended his own lifetime through the mentoring of his daughter, many of his nephews and nieces, and countless others before, during, and after medical school. But there's another Periapa I'd like to talk about today. The Periapa of nature, sustainability, and social justice. You see, I deliberately grouped these three together because I believe they were very much how Periapa thought about the world. Three complicated topics that are often so interconnected in their impact on each other and wider society. Now, I'm sure most people in this room have heard about Periapa's famous vegetable garden. It's a small vegetable garden surrounded by a short fence which sits within a much larger garden in a family home. That vegetable garden was a passion of Periapa's. He would tend to it day after day, year after year. I still remember the first time he showed me that vegetable garden. You could see the pleasure that it gave him, an almost childlike pleasure. And etched in my memory of that day was his smile that so many of us are familiar with. That peaceful, comforting, and gracious smile, those perfect white teeth. When I left for home that day, Periapa gave my wife and I some of his homegrown tomatoes. I was amazed by how juicy and ripe they were. There was no doubt in my mind that Periapa has shown as much love and compassion to those tomatoes as he so often did to his family and people in his care. But Periapa didn't see his actions in that vegetable garden as those of just another amateur gardener. He saw it as a small contribution to something much bigger. Periapa would often talk about planting thousands of trees in his native Sri Lanka. But this wasn't a vanity project. He saw these trees as a way of helping the local people achieve a more sustainable way of life. A way of empowering them so they were less reliant on multinational corporations that he believed did not look out for the soil and environment as well as the local community would. His goal in planting those trees was to make the world that little bit fairer, a little bit more just. A few years back, Periapa gave me a book and insisted I read it. The title of that book was The Ideas of Justice. The Ideas of Justice. Written by Indian economist and Nobel laureate Amartya Sen. If ever there was a book that could have been written for Periapa, this was it. I was rereading The Ideas of Justice recently, and one passage stood out for me, and I'll read it verbatim. Even though many human activities accompany the process of development may have destructive consequences, it is also within human power to enhance and improve the environment in which we live. Periapa spent much of his later life thinking of ways to enhance and improve the world in which we lived, so that those who came after him could enjoy the world as much as he did. He did this one small gesture at a time, but believe me, they added up. I want to end by talking about Periapa the Maverick, the man who that the man who challenged the status quo, who was always willing to stand up for those less fortunate than him, and a man who never forgot his roots. A man who will be missed, but never forgotten.
Thank you very much, Arogan. That was a very emotional information for us to gather. The next, we have a clip from Dr. Siva Memorial in Melbourne, who has sent a message for this particular occasion. Just let me find out whether we can get that play. Yeah.